We were keen to sort of run the sessions online for a number of reasons. The RGS have actually postponed their conference until 2021. So we did have the sort of right to really just delay today's sessions until next year's conference. But it seems a long time until September 2021, and the world seems to be changing at a very rapid pace. So we were thinking, we're not really sure you know, what next year's conference is going to be like, and whether it'll be the same as the traditional RGS conferences. So we were keen to run the sessions anyway, and we were also aware that, you know, things have changed, and this isn't really necessarily the ideal time to be talking about urban festivity, because there hasn't been a great deal of organised urban festivity over the last few months. But in some ways, it's a good time because it's a pause, it's a chance to reflect on what might happen in the future, and I think the work that all the presenters who are going to talk about their work today have done, we're hoping that really does still remain relevant. We think it does. Things are maybe gradually returning to normal, and I think all the papers that we wanted to include in the sessions were significant enough to have implications for future practice, you know, regardless of how things might change in the future. So I think a lot of festivals researchers have been sort of wrestling with themselves over the last few months, thinking, is the work I was doing before the lockdown still relevant, and do I need to change, and do I need to adapt it to reflect the sort of COVID-19 situation? And obviously we do need to sort of reflect on that, and today we will try and include some reflection on whether or not the work we're presenting is relevant, and how relevant it remains. But also it's a chance to really sort of think about the work that we were doing anyway, and to present it, and it's still significant and relevant enough to deserve exposure. So really that's what we're planning to do. We've got two sessions today as part of the programme. So two sessions with, I think there are 4 or 5 papers in each. The first is dedicated to specific events and the way in which they affect the spaces that host them. That's really, you know, sessions, or a session that really gets to the heart of the core of the papers, which was about this whole idea of the relationship between festivals and the city, but looking in particular at this idea of urban festivalisation and the way that spaces change because of festivals, and the way in which places and festivals are inherently linked. The second session after lunch is a little bit more generally focused. It's looking more at this sort of general relationship between cities and their festivals, including things like the economic effects, including their effects on the images of those cities and the way in which stories about those cities are told. And then we've got a panel session later on this afternoon for those of you with enough stamina to last until 2:30. The event today will finish with a panel session. So we've tried to include a few breaks. We realise these online events are sometimes a little bit too much. We're going to try and be really strict with time, because yeah, again, we don't want things to run over, and we realise it's quite a packed programme as it is. We'll try and keep each speaker to 10 minutes. We'll ask the chairs of those sessions to try and keep to those sort of 10 minutes. There is a hashtag for today's session. Let me just share that with you. So if I just get this on. So if you want to, I know we've got a lot of prolific tweeters today. So if anyone wants to sort of tweet about the session, then there is a hashtag on the holding slide here, which you can use if you want to communicate about what's happening today. I wanted to say a few things really also about the sort of subject of the symposium. So we know there's lots of academic work about festivals, and there is also some really good geographical work about festivals, and I've included 3 of my favourite bits of geographical work about festivals here. So I don't know if you've read Bernadette's with us today. Actually, she's one of the sort of members of the panel session later, but her paper on Arts Festival in the City back in 2005 is a really nice introduction for anyone who's not read it, on the relationship between festivals and the city, looking at the sort of range of issues and the range of sort of debates that surround that. And then a few years later, Gordon Waite wrote a paper, which was also in a geography journal, which also teased out some of the juiciest issues regarding the relationship between urban festivals and the city. More recently, I don't know if anyone's read this sort of Jonathan Wynne book, which came out 4 or 5 years ago. It's about music festivals in a particular part of the US. But again, he's an urban sociologist, but it's very geographical, and it looks at sort of the distribution of festivals in the city, and it's quite spatial in orientation. So we do not only have a lot of really good academic work on festivals, but we do have lots of good academic, or some good academic work on this relationship between festivals and the city. And I think that's obviously the relationship we want to explore a little bit more today. Some of the issues we hopefully want to cover are things like or certainly pre-COVID, the proliferation of festivals, the way in which the volume of regularity of urban festivity has changed and expanded, and the related issue about, this idea that what is a festival? A whole range of different events now call themselves festivals, and obviously that's also contributed to the expansion of what we're calling sort of city-based festivals. There are also related issues about why festivals are staged. We know that lots of cities have backed or launched festivals for economic reasons, to assist with regeneration, to assist with sort of image enhancement and place marketing, bringing inward investment. But then obviously we know a lot of cities have included festivals in their public policy and urban policy and social policy to try and bring communities together, to try and achieve a whole range of different social and cultural objectives at the city level as well. So we're interested in those sorts of different reasons why festivals are staged, and whether or not those motives are compatible with one another. We're interested in the relationship between festivals and place, whether or not that relationship is reciprocal, how places contribute to festivals as well as how festivals contribute to places. Because today's event is linked to Fest Space project, we're also really interested in thinking about inclusivity. So we're interested in whether or not festivals contribute to making urban spaces more inclusive. We know that some festivity is associated with making spaces maybe more exclusive, in that there are dynamics of commercialization, of securitization, of commoditization of urban spaces. So there's a whole critical work on maybe how some festivals make urban spaces less inclusive. But we are very interested in that sort of inclusivity angle and that inclusivity debate. And obviously, because of the sort of COVID situation, we're interested in exploring really how festivals might change in the future, and whether or not the previous sort of trends will continue, or whether the current situation represents a pause in activity, or whether things will sort of genuinely change. And as it says in the title, we're interested in festivalization, this whole process through which we're seeing cities and city space being used more regularly for a wider range of festivals. And again, there's some good literature on that. A lot of it's quite critical, but we quite like some of the work that's been done, which is a little bit more nuanced around festivalization, which sort of recognises some potential for positive effects too. So for example, Chalcraft and Maguada have written about the fact that festivalization is partly about urban branding and various sort of neoliberal city dimensions, but it also offers the possibility for a new democratic space where the performance of culture requires the interaction of artists, audience and locality. So this idea actually maybe there's an opportunity to open up spaces in which spatial relationships change and people are able to connect with each other and connect with art and art forms in a sort of different way. So we're quite interested in this trend whereby events are being taken out more and more into public spaces. So lots of events which maybe were traditionally staged in purpose-built locations, theatres and other venues, and obviously this trend for taking events out and festivals out of those spaces and using more publicly accessible spaces for festivity is a trend that we're interested in. And again, that maybe offers potential for